about Ho Chi Minh and about the Vietnamese Communist Party.
Và những cái hậu quả mà về kinh tế, về nhân mạng, về vật chất.
Physical damage can of course be repaired eventually, but it's the consequences in terms of culture and society that will be serious. For faith, culture and morality have all disintegrated, a trend which will continue as long as the Communist Party of Vietnam will still be around. That is the legacy of Ho Chi Minh's import of communism to Vietnam.
In answer to a question put to him by a Thanh Niên, young people reporter, Tran Quoc Thuan, deputy head of the Vietnamese National Assembly Office, said,
Our current institutions have many loopholes that open the way to corruption and gouging of state funds. Not to be a corrupt official in this environment would be a miracle. But what constitutes our greatest losses is not just money or assets, even though this may come to tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dong. What constitutes our greatest loss here is the disappearance of our moral code. We live in a society where we have to lie all the time in order to survive. Everyone picks up his salary check, but whoever lives by his salary check these days? We are so used to lie every day that it has become a habit. And that habit, repeated ad nauseum, becomes our new morality. But that morality is of course the pit, the loss of all moral bearings.
Ho Chi Minh w moim rozumieniu.
In my view, Ho Chi Minh's cruelty or his characteristics are not much different from Stalin's. As far as the Polish people are concerned, Stalin is an implacable enemy, and as far as the world is concerned, he was a genocidal murderer. Seen in general terms, Ho Chi Minh is one of the most reprehensible killers in the world. The way Ho Chi Minh is described in Europe is just like the way they used to describe Lenin in the Soviet Union. He was a literary figure, the author of many works, a poet, and they made him into an extremely great man, a national hero. But in actuality, that hero is no different from a common murderer, a criminal with genocide on his hands. As far as the Vietnamese are concerned, the distance from hero to murderer, a destroyer of Vietnamese culture, is not all that far. For a communist is almost by definition a murderer, a criminal guilty of genocide, a destroyer of his own culture. A communist may not be directly involved in a killing, a murder, an executioner, but he can still be considered such, because he is an accomplice to such murders and destruction of national culture. All of that is obvious.
Đó cũng là một cái bài học cho thấy rằng là
A lesson that can be drawn from all this is that although the propaganda machine of the Communist Party of Vietnam has expended much money and effort to persuade the young to believe in Ho Chi Minh, they fail miserably, since they cannot leave an ounce of persuasion in the mind of common people.
Ngày sinh nhật của ông ngày 19 tháng 5 thì bao giờ cũng
Every year on May 19, the birthday of Ho Chi Minh, my grandparents would burn incense on the altar for him. At school, they organized like a festival with flags and festoons all over. These images were so ingrained in me that I never questioned whether these things were good or bad for me. It was not until I came into contact with democracy activists that I learned many more things about Ho Chi Minh. Thus I came to know the truth. In my thinking, the best thing to do is to impart as much information to the youth so that they can judge by themselves. They should never be walled in like they are right now under communism.
Tất cả những gì hiện nay họ vẫn đang rao giảng về ông Hồ Chí Minh.
All that the CPV has propagated about Ho Chi Minh's moralities and thoughts, I no longer find them to be truth, after I've had a chance to compare with other information that I have come across. The communist leaders know this as well, I believe, but they still like to use Ho as a screen or an amulet to shelter them, so that they can keep power and go on controlling the Vietnamese people.
Theo quan điểm của tôi, cái tình trạng thế thảm, đau khổ của 80 triệu người Việt Nam hôm nay.
In my opinion, the suffering of over 8 million Vietnamese nowadays and the terrible shape of our country are the legacy of Mr. Ho Chi Minh. If he had not imported that erroneous ideology, communism, to soak our land with it, if he had not established that tyrannical communist party of his, and if he had not imposed that inhumane ideology on our people, then we wouldn't have the tragedies we witness today in our land. Yet there are many people who, out of ignorance or unconsciously, have tried to champion his cause, saying that in the end Ho Chi Minh is still a patriot, a man of morals, but it was his companions, his disciples, his underlings who failed to carry out his teachings, who did not live according to his model. Such people forget a most basic and simple truth, and that is, one can look at the fruit and know the tree, and one can look at the disciples and know the master.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The coming down of the Berlin Wall in November 1989 is arguably the most portentous event of the second half of the 20th century, signaling the collapse of communism, and especially international communism, in the world. The demise of communism was commemorated nearly 20 years later by a modest monument, the Victims of Communism Memorial, raised right in the heart of Washington, the capital of the United States. On June 12, 2007, President George W. Bush spoke at its inaugural ceremony.
Here in the company of men who resisted evil, helped bring down an empire, I proudly accept the Victims of Communism